Welcome, travelers of the mind. I'm the sleepy sage, and tonight we journey to ancient India, to a time when gods walked among mortals, when demons performed impossible penances, and when the very fabric of the cosmos trembled under the weight of ambition. This is the story of Mahishasura, the buffalo demon whose name echoes through millennia. But this isn't just a tale of good versus evil. It's a story about the dangerous nature of desire, the complexity of power, and the thin line between righteousness and tyranny. It's about a being who sought to become unkillable, who waged war against the heavens themselves, and whose fall would require the birth of a goddess. Before we begin this journey together, I'm curious. Where in the world are you listening from? Whether you're winding down for sleep in California, starting your morning in Mumbai, taking an afternoon break in London, or finding a moment of peace anywhere else on this planet, I'd love to know. Drop a comment below telling me your country and what time zone you're in as you listen to this. There's something beautiful about knowing that this ancient story is connecting people across continents and time zones, all of us sharing this moment together. So settle in wherever you are, let your mind drift, and let me tell you the untold story of the demon who asked for immortality. To understand Mahishasura, we must first understand the world he was born into, a cosmos divided not simply into good and evil, but into two opposing forces, the Devas and the Asuras. In Hindu cosmology, the Devas are often called gods, celestial beings who dwell in the heavens, who maintain cosmic order, who embody light and righteousness. They're led by Indra, the king of the heavens, wielder of the thunderbolt, controller of rain and storms. But here's what Western audiences often miss. The Devas aren't perfectly good. They're powerful, yes. Divine, certainly. But they're also prone to pride, jealousy, and political maneuvering. The Asuras, often translated as demons or titans, are the Devas' eternal rivals. But they're not pure evil either. They're complex beings, often brilliant, disciplined, and capable of extraordinary devotion. The conflict between Devas and Asuras isn't about good versus evil. It's about order versus chaos, establishment versus rebellion, those who hold power versus those who seek it. This cosmic rivalry had been raging since the beginning of time, with victories on both sides, with periods of peace and epics of war. And into this ancient conflict, Mahishasura would be born. Mahishasura's birth was anything but ordinary. His father, Brahma, was a powerful Asura king, a being of immense strength and magical prowess. But his mother? His mother was a buffalo. Yes, you heard that right. A water buffalo named Mahishi. Now, before you dismiss this as mythological strangeness, understand that shape-shifting was common in these ancient tales. Brahma had fallen in love with the beauty of Mahishi, and through yogic powers, they had united. Their union produced a son who could take two forms, a powerful warrior with the features of a man and a massive, unstoppable buffalo. This dual nature would define Mahishasura's entire existence. He was literally caught between two worlds, the humanoid form that could think, plan, and perform rituals, and the buffalo form that represented raw, untamed power. In many ways, he embodied the conflict between civilization and wilderness, between refinement and primal force. The young Mahishasura grew up in the court of his father, surrounded by tales of the Devas' supremacy, by stories of how the Asuras had been defeated again and again, cast down from the heavens, denied the nectar of immortality called Amrita. He heard how Indra sat on his celestial throne, how the Devas enjoyed the prayers and worship of mortals while the Asuras were scorned as demons. And in the heart of young Mahishasura, a seed was planted, not just of ambition, but of righteous anger. Why should the Devas rule supreme? Why should his people be cast as villains? What made Indra and his ilk so special? As Mahishasura came of age, he made a decision that would alter the fate of the three worlds, Earth, the heavens, and the underworld. He would not accept the status quo. He would not live as a lesser being in a cosmos ordered by the Devas. He would become immortal. He would become unconquerable, and he would overthrow the gods themselves. But here's where Mahishasura showed his cunning. He understood something profound about the nature of power in the Hindu cosmos. Pure strength wasn't enough. The gods themselves followed cosmic laws, ancient rules that governed all beings. And among these laws was one particularly powerful principle, the power of tapas, or penance. Through severe austerities, through meditation and self-denial, any being could accumulate spiritual power. And with enough tapas, one could demand boons from the gods themselves. Brahma, the creator, was particularly bound by this rule. If someone performed sufficient penance, Brahma was obligated to appear and grant a wish, almost any wish. Mahishasura decided he would perform such a penance, a tapas so severe, so extreme, that Brahma himself would have no choice but to grant him immortality. Mahishasura chose his location carefully. He traveled to a remote mountain peak, far from the distractions of civilization, far from the concerns of his father's kingdom. The place he chose was thick with spiritual energy, one of those rare locations where the boundary between the material and divine worlds grew thin. Here, Mahishasura began his tapas. For those unfamiliar with the concept, understand that tapas literally means heat. It's the spiritual fire generated through austerity, the power accumulated through self-denial and focused devotion. And the methods of tapas were brutal by any standard. Mahishasura started with what might seem like simple meditation. He sat in the lotus position, legs crossed, spine straight, and began to chant. But he didn't stop. Days turned to weeks. Weeks turned to months. He sat without moving, without eating, barely breathing. Rain fell upon him. He did not move. The sun beat down. He remained still. Wild animals approached, curious about this strange statue of flesh. He continued his meditation. But Mahishasura knew that simple meditation, however extended, wouldn't be enough. Other beings had meditated for years and received only minor boons. If he wanted immortality, true, absolute immortality, he would need to go further. So he escalated his penance. He stood on one leg, arms raised to the sky, maintaining this position for months. His muscles screamed, but his will was iron. He reduced his food intake to a single leaf per day, then to air alone, attempting to survive on prana, life force itself. He exposed himself to the 5 sacred fires, sitting in the center of 4 blazing pyres with the sun overhead as the 5th fire, the heat so intense it would have killed an ordinary being in minutes. The texts say his body became like burnt wood, blackened and thin, all moisture evaporated, all fat consumed. Yet still he continued. But here's what makes this story so fascinating. What was going through Mahishasura's mind during these endless days and nights? Was it pure ambition? Was it hatred for the devas? Or had the penance itself become the point? A test of will, a proving of his own strength? Perhaps all three. Perhaps he had transcended simple motivation and entered a state where the suffering was its own reward, where pushing past every limit became a form of power in itself. Mahishasura's tapas began to affect the cosmos itself. This is a crucial concept in Hindu mythology. Extreme austerities don't just happen in isolation. They generate heat, literal cosmic heat, that can threaten the stability of reality. The universe operates on balance, and when one being accumulates too much power, that balance tips dangerously. The rivers began to dry up. The earth trembled. The sun blazed hotter. The 3 worlds, earth, heaven, and the underworld, began to destabilize. The devas in their celestial realm felt the disturbance and grew concerned. Who was performing such a penance? They asked Indra. Indra, from his throne, looked down upon the earth with his divine vision and saw Mahishasura, burnt and skeletal, yet radiating more power than armies of warriors. "It's the son of Brahma," Indra said, his voice troubled. "The one born of the buffalo. His tapas has become so powerful it threatens the cosmic order." The devas debated among themselves. Some suggested sending obstacles, creating illusions to break Mahishasura's concentration, or sending celestial nymphs to tempt him. But others, wiser, cautioned against it. "His will is too strong. they said. Any obstacle we place will only increase the merit of his penance. We cannot stop him now. Brahma will have to grant him a boon. And so the Devas waited, anxious, as Mahishasura's penance continued to grow in power. Finally, after years of unbroken austerity, the cosmos could take no more. The cosmic laws demanded response. The sky above Mahishasura's meditation spot began to glow. Clouds swirled. Divine music filled the air. And descending on a lotus throne, ancient beyond reckoning, came Brahma, the creator himself. Brahma has 4 heads, each facing a cardinal direction, symbolizing his all-seeing nature. He holds a water pot, prayer beads, and the Vedas, the sacred texts. His presence is overwhelming, radiating power that makes even a mountain seem small. Rise, Mahishasura. Brahma's voice echoed like thunder and whisper combined. Your tapas has shaken the 3 worlds. The very laws of creation demand that I grant you a boon. Ask, and if it is within the bounds of cosmic law, it shall be yours. This was the moment Mahishasura had tortured himself to reach. Years of suffering culminated in this single opportunity. He had one chance to ask for the right thing. Mahishasura, his body ravaged, but his mind sharp, rose to his feet. He transformed into his humanoid form, tall, powerful, with the horns of a buffalo crowning his head. He folded his hands in respect and spoke. Great Creator, Lord of all, I ask for immortality. Let no weapon harm me. Let no being in the 3 worlds be able to kill me. Brahma was silent for a long moment. His 4 faces contemplated simultaneously, each thinking through the implications. You know, I cannot grant true immortality, Brahma said finally. Such a boon would violate the fundamental laws of creation. Everything that is born must die. Everything that begins must end. This is the way of Dharma, the cosmic order. Mahishasura had expected this. He had spent years thinking through his request during his meditation. Then grant me this, he said. Let no man be able to kill me. Let no god of the present creation in my life. Let no demon, no mortal, no animal known to the 3 worlds have the power to take my life. Brahma considered. This was cleverly worded. It didn't ask for true immortality, but it came close. Under such a boon, Mahishasura would be invulnerable to virtually everything. Every warrior, every deity currently existing, every creature known to creation. But there was a loophole. Brahma, bound by cosmic law to grant the boon, but also committed to maintaining ultimate balance, accepted the request with a slight modification. So it shall be, Brahma declared. No man shall kill you. No god of the current pantheon shall end your life. No known creature shall have that power. You shall be invincible in battle, untouchable by any weapon wielded by male hands. Mahishasura's eyes gleamed. He heard the words, but in his excitement, he missed, or chose to ignore, the precise phrasing. Male hands. No man. No god. But goddesses? That possibility seemed so remote as to be non-existent. The divine feminine, while revered, rarely took on warrior forms in those days. The great warriors were all male: Indra, Vishnu, Shiva. The idea that his doom might come from female power seemed impossibly unlikely. Mahishasura bowed low. Thank you, great creator. I shall use this boon to reshape the cosmos itself. Brahma, his expression unreadable, dissolved back into the divine realms, his duty fulfilled. And Mahishasura, now virtually invincible, stood on that mountain peak and laughed, a sound that echoed across the 3 worlds, a sound filled with triumph and terrible promise. Mahishasura's first actions after receiving his boon reveal much about his character. He didn't immediately attack the heavens. Instead, he began methodically, strategically building his power base. He returned to his father's kingdom and announced his new invincibility. The Asuras, long oppressed by the Devas, rallied to him immediately. Here was a leader who couldn't be killed, who had earned the blessing of Brahma himself. Under Mahishasura's command, the Asura armies organized as never before. But Mahishasura was not content with just Asura support. He began conquering kingdoms across the earth, bringing both mortal and demon realms under his control. And here's what's interesting. By many accounts, he wasn't a cruel conqueror. He offered kingdoms a choice: submit peacefully and be treated fairly, or resist and be crushed utterly. Many chose submission. Mahishasura installed governors, maintained law and order, and even promoted prosperity in many regions. He wasn't conquering for the sake of cruelty. He was conquering to build an empire strong enough to challenge the heavens. His army grew enormous. Millions of asuras, demons, and even mortal warriors who believed in his cause joined his ranks. He had generals commanding vast legions, strategists planning campaigns, and magicians creating weapons of terrible power. Within a few short years, Mahishasura controlled most of the earth. Kings bowed to him. Sages, even some holy men, acknowledged his power. And everywhere, temples to the Devas began to close or convert to honoring Mahishasura instead. Of course, not everyone submitted peacefully. There were heroes on earth, legendary warriors, champions of righteousness who could not accept a demon's rule. They came from Mahishasura, singly and in armies. They wielded divine weapons blessed by the gods. They used strategy, ambush, poison, and every form of warfare known to man. All of them failed. Arrows bounced off Mahishasura's skin. Swords shattered against his flesh. Spears bent. Maces broke. Poisons had no effect. And when Mahishasura transformed into his buffalo form, he became even more invulnerable. A massive creature with horns that could gore through walls, with hooves that shook the earth, with a hide that no mortal weapon could pierce. One story tells of a great king named Rathadhara, known as the greatest archer of his age. He had never missed a shot, never failed to fell his target. Confident in his skill and righteousness, he challenged Mahishasura to single combat. Mahishasura accepted. He even removed his armor and weapons, standing bare-chested before the archer. "Shoot," Mahishasura said. "Use your best arrows. I will not dodge." Rathadhara, despite his confidence, felt a chill. There was something unsettling about this confidence. But he drew his bow, said a prayer to Indra, and released his finest arrow, one blessed by the gods, capable of piercing mountains. The arrow struck Mahishasura's chest and shattered into splinters. Rathadhara shot again, and again, and again. 100 arrows, each more powerful than the last. Each one broke harmlessly against the demon's skin. Finally, exhausted, his fingers bleeding from the bowstring, Rathadhara fell to his knees. Mahishasura walked up to him, gently lifted his chin, and spoke in a voice that was almost kind. "Your skill is magnificent. Your courage is unquestionable. But you serve the wrong masters. Join me, and you'll have a place of honor in the new order. Refuse, and I'll let you go back to your king with your life, this time. But tell them all, there is no weapon in the mortal world that can harm me." Rathadhara chose to leave, spreading word of Mahishasura's invincibility. The message was clear: resistance was futile, but Mahishasura wasn't content with earthly rule. His eyes were fixed on the heavens. However, he was strategic enough to know that attacking Indra's realm directly would be costly, even for him. So he employed a different strategy. He would cut off the god's power at its source. In Hindu cosmology, the gods derive much of their strength from sacrifices performed by humans on earth. When fire offerings are made, when prayers are chanted, when rituals are conducted, that spiritual energy flows upward to sustain the Devas. It's a symbiotic relationship. Gods protect humans, humans worship gods. Mahishasura began systematically disrupting this relationship. He banned worship of the Devas in all his territories. Temples were converted or destroyed. Brahmins, the priestly class who conducted rituals, were forbidden from performing fire sacrifices to the gods. Those who continued secretly were punished. Some fled to remote forests to continue their practices, but many complied out of fear. The effect was immediate and devastating. In the heavens, the Devas began to weaken. The flow of sacrificial energy dwindled to a trickle. Indra felt his power waning. The celestial realm, always glowing with divine light, began to dim. The gods watched in growing alarm as Mahishasura's empire expanded and their own strength diminished. They held councils, debated strategies, argued among themselves. But what could they do? Brahma's boon protected Mahishasura from them. Direct confrontation was impossible. We need to be patient, some counseled. Surely this boon has a limit. Surely Brahma left a loophole. But Indra was not a patient god. He was a warrior god, accustomed to dominance and used to feeling afraid. And as Mahishasura's power grew, Indra made a fateful decision. He would lead the Devas to war. The day the war began, the cosmos held its breath. From his palace in the heavens, Indra rallied his forces. The Devas assembled, powerful beings of light and cosmic power. Vayu, the wind god, who could level cities with a breath. Agni, the fire god, whose flames could consume anything. Varuna, lord of the oceans, who could drown continents. The divine architects, the celestial warriors, the Gandharvas with their magical music, the Apsaras with their enchantments, all assembled for war. It was a sight of terrible beauty. The divine army stretched across the sky, glowing with celestial light, armed with weapons that could unmake reality itself. On earth, Mahishasura saw them coming. He smiled. Finally, he said to his generals, finally they come. He transformed into his buffalo form. Not just any buffalo, but a creature of nightmare proportions. As large as a mountain, with horns that could pierce the sky, with eyes that burned with demonic fire, with breath that came out as poisonous smoke. Around him, his armies assembled. Millions of Asuras, demons of every form, giants, Rakshasas, creatures of darkness and chaos. The two armies met at the boundary between earth and heaven, at that liminal space where the material and divine worlds intersect. When the armies collided, reality itself seemed to shake. Indra led the charge personally, riding his white elephant Iravata, wielding his Vajra, the thunderbolt weapon. He hurled lightning at Mahishasura, bolts of pure divine energy that could vaporize mountains. The lightning struck Mahishasura's buffalo form and dissipated harmlessly, like rain falling on stone. Impossible, Indra shouted. But Mahishasura didn't waste time with words. He charged, his massive form barreling forward with the force of an avalanche. Devas scattered before him. His horns gored celestial warriors. His hooves crushed divine chariots. Around them, the battle raged on every level. Asura generals clashed with Deva commanders. Agni unleashed walls of flame, only to have them absorbed by demon sorcerers. Vayu created hurricanes, but Asura magicians countered with their own storm magic. The sea god Varuna summoned tsunamis. They crashed against shields of darkness. The battle was like nothing the cosmos had ever seen. It raged for days, then weeks, then months. The boundary between earth and heaven became a wasteland of craters and devastation. Divine blood mixed with demonic ichor. The screams of the dying filled the air. And slowly, inexorably, the Devas began to lose. It wasn't a sudden defeat. It was a grinding, terrible realization. Every time Indra or another powerful Deva confronted Mahishasura directly, they found themselves unable to harm him. Weapons blessed by Brahma himself bounced off his hide. Magic that could reshape reality had no effect on him. And while the buffalo demon couldn't easily kill gods, they too had their immortalities and protections. It could wound them, tire them, drive them back. More importantly, Mahishasura's armies were winning the broader battle. For every Asura that fell, two more seemed to take its place. The Devas, meanwhile, were weakening. The lack of sacrifices from earth had taken its toll. After nearly a year of constant battle, the unthinkable happened. Indra called for retreat. The Devas, bloodied and exhausted, withdrew to the heavens. Mahishasura's forces pursued, and for the first time in cosmic history, demon armies entered Swarga, the heaven realm. They fought through the divine gardens where wish-fulfilling trees grew. They battled in the halls of Indra's palace, where the walls were made of crystallized light. They clashed in the treasure rooms where the gods kept the accumulated wealth of ages. Indra and his closest allies made a desperate last stand at the throne room. But even here, even fighting on their home ground with the last reserves of their power, they couldn't prevail. Mahishasura, in his humanoid form now, walked slowly toward Indra's throne. Arrows and spears flew at him and fell harmlessly. Divine weapons struck him and shattered. "You've ruled for eons," Mahishasura said, his voice echoing through the hall. "But every reign must end. Yours ends today." Indra, proud Indra, king of the gods, had to make a choice: die uselessly in a last stand, or flee and hope for a future chance at victory. He chose survival, taking only his closest companions, a few dozen devas who had remained loyal. Indra fled his own heaven. They escaped through hidden pathways known only to the divine, pursued by Asura armies. They fled beyond the heavens, into the spaces between worlds, into remote corners of the cosmos where Mahishasura's power didn't yet reach. And Mahishasura took the throne of heaven. He sat upon Indra's seat in Indra's palace and claimed dominion over the three worlds. Asuras now controlled the heavens. The celestial realm, once bright with divine light, took on a darker hue, still magnificent, still powerful, but changed in character. Mahishasura appointed his generals as governors of different regions of heaven. He opened the divine treasuries. He claimed the wish-fulfilling cow, the celestial tree, the flying chariots, all the wonders that the devas had accumulated. But more importantly, he claimed the right to receive the worship meant for the gods. From his new throne, Mahishasura remade the cosmos in his image. He sent proclamations to earth. All worship was to be directed to him now. He was the lord of the three worlds. The old gods were defeated, exiled, powerless. A new age had begun. And for a time, months that stretched into years, this new order held. Mahishasura ruled with an iron fist, but not without a certain logic. He maintained order, settled disputes, and even protected his subject from chaos. To those who submitted, he offered security and even prosperity. The trains ran on time, you might say, even if they ran toward darkness. But something was wrong. The cosmos itself seemed out of balance. Crops began to fail for no reason. Natural disasters became more common. The seasons became erratic. This wasn't caused by Mahishasura's rule directly. He wasn't being cruel for cruelty's sake. Rather, it was a symptom of cosmic imbalance. The devas had their role in maintaining the order of creation. Without them in their proper place, that order was breaking down. Sages began to whisper that this couldn't last. The cosmos was self-correcting. It had to be. But how? Mahishasura was invincible to all known powers. In the remote places where they hid, the exiled devas wondered the same thing. They performed their own penances now. They prayed to the supreme powers beyond even Brahma, beyond even the highest gods. They prayed to the Devi, the goddess, the feminine principle that existed before creation, that was creation itself. And in the cosmic womb of possibility, something began to stir that let's spend a moment with the exiled gods, because their desperation is crucial to understanding what comes next. Indra and his remaining devas were hiding in a remote region of the cosmos. Think of it as the metaphysical equivalent of a cave in the wilderness, far from the grand palaces they once occupied. They lived like refugees, divine beings reduced to skulking in shadows, their power diminished, their pride shattered. Indra, especially, was changed. The king of gods had been humbled utterly. Some of the younger devas blamed him. If he had been wiser, more cautious, perhaps they could have found a way to counter Mahishasura without direct confrontation. But recriminations were useless now. They took stock of their situation. One by one, the devas listed everything they had tried. We attacked with divine weapons. They had no effect. We tried strategy and deception. He saw through them. We attempted to create counterboons. Brahma would not go against his own word. We appealed to Brahma to take back the boon. He said the cosmic laws prevented it. Every avenue seemed closed. Mahishasura was invincible. and they had no recourse. It was Brahma himself who finally appeared to the exiled gods, perhaps out of pity, perhaps out of cosmic necessity. He materialized in their hidden refuge, his four faces grave. "I cannot undo what I have done," Brahma said before anyone could ask. The boon stands. Mahishasura cannot be killed by any male being, any god of the current pantheon, any known creature. These are the laws I am bound by. "Then we are lost," Indra said bitterly. "Perhaps not," Brahma replied. "You've been thinking within the bounds of what exists. But I am the creator. I can create something new." The gods leaned forward, hope flickering for the first time in months. "There is one possibility," Brahma continued. "The boon protects Mahishasura from men, from male gods, from known creatures. But it does not protect him from a power that doesn't yet exist, a goddess who has never manifested in warrior form." The gods looked at each other. In their pantheon, goddesses existed, certainly. Sarasvati, goddess of knowledge. Lakshmi, goddess of prosperity. Parvati, wife of Shiva. But these were not warrior forms. They were nurturing, creative, sustaining forces. "You're saying we need to create a warrior goddess?" Indra asked. "Not create," Brahma corrected. "We need to invoke one who has always existed in potential. The Devi, the supreme feminine force. She is Prakriti, the primal energy from which all creation springs. She is Shakti, the power that animates everything. She exists beyond the individual goddesses, you know. And if she can be convinced to manifest in warrior form, she will not be bound by the limitations I placed on Mahishasura's boon." "How do we invoke such a power?" asked Vishnu, the preserver god, who had been quietly listening. "You must give of yourselves," Brahma said. "Each of you must sacrifice a portion of your own power, your own essence. Combined, channeled properly, this energy can call forth the Devi in her warrior aspect." The implications were clear. They would be weakening themselves further, already diminished gods becoming even less powerful. It was a desperate gamble. But what choice did they have? In their place of exile, the gods prepared for the ritual. They formed a circle, the surviving Devas, each one representing a different aspect of cosmic function. Indra, king of gods. Vishnu, the preserver. Shiva, the destroyer. Brahma himself. Agni, fire. Vayu, wind. Varuna, water. The sun god Surya. The moon god Chandra. Kabura, lord of wealth. Yama, god of death. And others, dozens of divine beings. They began to meditate, each one going deep into their own essence, finding the core of their power. And then, one by one, they began to release it. Indra released his divine kingship, his authority, his power over thunder and rain. A blazing light emerged from his body. Shiva released his power of destruction, his third eye's fire, his mastery over death. A fierce radiance poured from him. Vishnu released his power of preservation, his ability to maintain cosmic order, his divine weapons. A blue luminescence flowed from his form. One by one, each god contributed. The fire god released flames. The wind god released his breath. The ocean lord released the power of the depths. These energies, different colors, different qualities, began to swirl together in the center of the circle. They mixed and combined, creating something new, something that had never existed in quite this form before. The energies began to coalesce, to take shape. And slowly, from this cosmic fusion, a form emerged. First came the face, beautiful beyond description, radiating both compassion and terrible wrath. Eyes that held the wisdom of eternity and the fury of a storm. Then the body, feminine, powerful, perfect in every proportion. She was golden in complexion, glowing with an inner light that made the gods themselves seem dim. But this was not a gentle goddess. This was Durga, the invincible one, the one who exists beyond reach of evil. As she manifested fully, the gods each gifted her their weapons and powers. Shiva gave her his trident, the Trishula, capable of destroying anything. Vishnu gave her his discus, the Sudarshana chakra, a spinning wheel of pure energy. Indra gave her his thunderbolt, the Vajra. Agni gave her a flaming dart. Vayu gave her a bow and arrows that could pierce anything. Varuna gave her a conch and a noose. The sun god gave her rays of light solidified into blades. The mountain god Himalaya gave her a fierce lion as her mount. Each weapon had been wielded by a male god, but in Durga's hands, they transcended their previous nature. They became aspects of the feminine power that sustains and destroys the universe. Durga stood before the assembled gods in her full glory. She had 8 arms, each wielding a different weapon. Her lion mount roared, a sound that echoed across dimensions. Her eyes blazed with divine fury. When she spoke, her voice was like thunder and song combined. I am she who was before creation. I am the power that spins the cosmos. I am the mother and the destroyer, the beginning and the end. You have called me forth to restore balance, and so I shall. Where is this demon who dares to disrupt the cosmic order? Indra fell to his knees. Great goddess, Mahishasura has taken the heavens. He has driven us into exile. He has a boon from Brahma that makes him invincible to all male powers, to all known creatures. We are powerless against him. Durga's lips curved in a smile that was both beautiful and terrifying. Then it is good you called upon a power he did not anticipate. Take me to him. The gods didn't need to take Durga to Mahishasura. She knew the way. She mounted her lion and began the journey toward the heavens, toward the stolen throne. Word of her coming spread like wildfire. Asuras on the borders of heaven saw her approach, a goddess on a lion, blazing with power, armed with the weapons of the gods. They rushed to inform Mahishasura. The buffalo demon was in Indra's former throne room, holding court when the news arrived. A goddess, he said, amused. One goddess? She comes alone. Yes, Lord. She claims she will challenge you. Mahishasura laughed. He had defeated armies of gods. What could one goddess do? But something in the report gave him pause. The messenger described her eyes, her weapons, the way reality seemed to bend around her presence. This was not an ordinary being. Very well, Mahishasura said, rising from the throne. If she wishes to challenge me, I'll grant her that honor. Perhaps after I defeat her, the gods will finally understand that their time is over. He walked out onto the great terrace of the heavenly palace, the place where Indra once stood to address the cosmos. And there, floating in the sky before him, mounted on her lion, was Durga. Even Mahishasura, confident in his invincibility, felt something he hadn't felt in years, a moment of uncertainty. She was magnificent. Power radiated from her in waves. Her 8 arms held weapons that gleamed with cosmic significance. Her lion roared a challenge that shook the foundations of heaven itself. Mahishasura, her voice rang out clear and strong. You have broken the cosmic order. You have stolen what is not yours. You have brought imbalance to the 3 worlds. I am here to restore what you have destroyed. Mahishasura's uncertainty vanished, replaced by his familiar arrogance. He transformed into his buffalo form. Massive, terrible, unstoppable. I have Brahma's boon, he bellowed. No man can kill me. No god can harm me. What makes you think you're any different? Durga's smile was serene and terrifying at once. I'm not a man. I'm not a god of the pantheon, you know. I am the force that existed before gods and demons, before creation itself. Your boon means nothing to me. And with that, the greatest battle in cosmic history began. Durga struck first. She didn't waste time with words or warnings. She simply acted. Her lion leaped forward with supernatural speed. Durga, riding atop it, hurled the Vajra, Indra's thunderbolt, directly at Mahishasura's massive buffalo form. The thunderbolt that had bounced harmlessly off Mahishasura when Indra wielded it now struck with devastating force. It hit the demon's shoulder and actually wounded him. Black ichor sprayed from the impact. Mahishasura roared in pain and surprise. He was hurt. For the first time since receiving his boon, he was actually hurt. The reality of his situation crashed down on him. The loophole, the one possibility he had dismissed. Female power. He had never imagined it could manifest like this. But Mahishasura didn't become Lord of the Three Worlds by giving up easily. If she could hurt him, he would overwhelm her with pure force. He charged, his massive buffalo form barreling forward with the momentum of a mountain. His horns, each as large as ancient trees, aimed to gore both goddess and lion. Durga's lion dodged with impossible grace, leaping aside at the last instant. As Mahishasura thundered past, Durga launched a volley of arrows from Vayu's bow. Each arrow struck true, piercing the demon's hide, drawing more of that dark blood. Mahishasura wheeled around, and the battle escalated. What happened next was less a fight and more a cosmic dance, a choreography of violence and grace that unfolded across multiple dimensions. Mahishasura transformed back to his humanoid form, growing to giant size, now wielding his own weapons, a massive club, a sword forged from demonic metal. He swung at Durga with strength that could shatter worlds. She parried with Shiva's trident, the impact creating shockwaves that cracked the floor of heaven. She spun, her 8 arms moving in perfect coordination, each weapon finding targets, each strike calculated and precise. She threw the Sudarshana chakra, Vishnu's discus, and it spun toward Mahishasura, a wheel of pure destruction. He tried to dodge, but it curved in mid-flight, following him, slicing across his back. He bellowed in rage and pain. Mahishasura summoned his own dark powers. He created duplicates of himself, 10, then 100, then 1,000 Mahishasuras, all attacking at once from every direction. Durga didn't hesitate. She multiplied her arms, now 16, now 32, each one wielding a weapon, each one independent yet perfectly coordinated. She fought all 1,000 duplicates simultaneously, destroying them one by one until only the real Mahishasura remained. The demon tried changing tactics. He transformed into his buffalo form and charged the ground, causing earthquakes. The heavenly palace began to crack and crumble. He was willing to destroy everything if it meant defeating her. Durga leaped into the air, her lion roaring beneath her. She hurled Agni's dart, a weapon of pure flame, down at the buffalo. It struck between his horns and exploded in divine fire. Mahishasura screamed, shaking his head violently, trying to extinguish the flames. Hours passed, then days. The battle raged without pause. Mahishasura was discovering something terrible. He could be wounded. He could bleed. He could feel pain. And while Brahma's boon meant he couldn't easily be killed, Durga was proving that she could hurt him in ways no one else ever had. He began to feel something unfamiliar creeping into his heart. Fear. He tried everything. He used every form of combat he knew. He employed demonic magic, creating illusions, summoning darkness, calling forth storms of blood and fire. He shape-shifted rapidly, buffalo to humanoid to buffalo again, trying to keep her off balance. Nothing worked. Durga countered every move with perfect precision. She was fighting not just with skill, but with fundamental cosmic authority. Every strike she made carried the weight of universal law behind it, the force of balance asserting itself against chaos. Mahishasura called for his armies. Thousands of Asuras rushed to aid their lord. They swarmed around Durga, attacking from all sides. She barely seemed to notice them. Her weapons moved in blurs. Asuras fell by the dozens, then hundreds. Her lion tore through demon ranks like they were paper. And through it all, she kept her primary focus on Mahishasura himself. The demon lord realized with growing horror that he was going to lose. The transformation of understanding. In the midst of battle, something strange happened to Mahishasura's consciousness. Pain has a way of clarifying thought, and he had never felt this much pain before. As Durga's weapons struck him again and again, as his power, his seeming invincibility, proved insufficient, his mind began to race through his entire existence. He remembered his birth, the strange child of two worlds, never quite fitting in either. He remembered his father's tales of Asura defeats, the bitterness in every story. He remembered deciding that he would be different, that he would be the one to change everything. He remembered the years of tapas, the suffering he had endured to earn his boon, the burning, the starvation, the pain that had seemed worth it because it was leading to ultimate power. He remembered his conquests, the thrill of victory, the satisfaction of defeating those who had looked down on Asura's Freeans. He remembered sitting on Indra's throne and feeling like he had finally achieved his purpose. But now, facing Durga, bleeding from countless wounds, he understood something he had missed in his ambition. Power without wisdom is meaningless. Invincibility without purpose is hollow. He had conquered the three worlds, but to what end? To rule? To prove a point? To satisfy his ego? In Hindu philosophy, there's a concept called viveka, discriminative wisdom, the ability to distinguish between the eternal and the temporary, between the real and the unreal. Mahishasura, in these moments of desperate battle, was experiencing a flash of viveka. He had sought immortality, but he had missed the point entirely. True immortality wasn't about living forever in a physical form. It was about transcending the cycle of ego and desire altogether. But this realization came too late. Mahishasura made one last desperate attempt. He transformed into his buffalo form one final time, but now he poured everything into it, all his remaining power, all his magic, all his will to survive. He became enormous, larger than he had ever been, a buffalo the size of a mountain range. His horns scraped the sky. His hooves cracked the foundation of heaven. His eyes blazed with desperate fury. He charged at Durga with the last of his strength, intending to crush her utterly, to end this fight through sheer, overwhelming force. Durga saw him coming. She could have dodged. She could have used her weapons from a distance. But instead, she did something unexpected. She dismounted from her lion and stood on the ground, planting her feet firmly. She raised one hand in a gesture of both blessing and finality. And she waited. Mahishasura thundered toward her, the ground quaking with each step, his massive form blotting out the sun. At the last possible moment, as his horns were about to gore her, Durga leaped. She jumped onto his head, landing between his horns with perfect balance. And in her hand, she held a weapon she hadn't used yet. A simple sword, but one that gleamed with the light of absolute truth. Mahishasura tried to shake her off, thrashing his head wildly, trying to throw her. But she stood firm, as immovable as a mountain, as inevitable as death itself. Mahishasura, she said, her voice cutting through his roars. You sought to escape death. You sought power over all. But you forgot the fundamental truth. Everything that begins must end. Every rise necessitates a fall. This is not cruelty. This is the nature of existence itself. Mahishasura, in his buffalo form, understood. Perhaps for the first time in his life, he truly understood. He stopped thrashing. In his dark eyes, there was a moment of clarity, perhaps even gratitude. Durga raised her sword high. The blade caught the light of the sun, blazing like a star. May you find in your next life what you sought in this one, peace. And she brought the sword down. The sword struck Mahishasura's neck with the force of cosmic inevitability. In Hindu iconography, this moment is captured in countless sculptures and paintings. Durga standing triumphant on the buffalo's head, her foot pressing down, her sword completing its arc. It's one of the most recognizable images in Hindu art, but behind the symbol lies this story of complexity and tragedy. The blade cut through flesh and bone. Mahishasura's buffalo form shuddered, a tremor that shook the three worlds. His massive body began to dissolve, the demonic power that had sustained it flowing away like water. But something remarkable happened as he died. From the neck of the buffalo, as the head separated from the body, a form emerged. Mahishasura in his humanoid shape, freed from the prison of his final transformation. He stood there for a moment, facing Durga. His body was translucent, already fading, but his eyes were clear. The arrogance was gone. The rage had evaporated. What remained was a soul facing its end with unexpected dignity. Some versions of the story say he spoke in this final moment. Others say he merely looked at Durga with understanding. But the message was the same. He acknowledged her victory not with bitterness, but with acceptance. Durga lowered her sword. Her many arms returned to rest positions. Her expression, which had been fierce in battle, softened into something approaching compassion. "You were magnificent in your way," she said quietly. "But you forgot that strength without dharma leads only to destruction of others and of oneself. Go now. Be released from this cycle. May your next birth bring you closer to wisdom." Mahishasura's form dissolved completely, his soul released from the material world, entering the cycle of rebirth that governs all beings in Hindu cosmology. The massive buffalo body crumbled, turning to ash that scattered on cosmic winds. The blood that had been spilled evaporated, leaving no stain. It was as if the battlefield itself was cleansing, reality reasserting its proper order. Silence fell across the heavens. The Asura armies that had been fighting stopped, staring in disbelief. Their invincible lord was gone. The being who couldn't be killed had been killed. Their entire worldview had just collapsed. Some fled immediately, running back to their demon realms. Others stood frozen, unable to process what they'd witnessed. A few, the wisest among them, fell to their knees before Durga, recognizing the futility of further resistance. Durga didn't pursue the fleeing Asuras. She didn't seek vengeance or retribution. Her purpose had been specific: restore balance. That balance was now restored. She turned to find the exiled gods emerging from their hiding places, led by Indra. They approached cautiously, still awed by her power, unsure how to address this cosmic force they had summoned. Indra fell to his knees. "Great goddess, you have saved us. You have restored the heavens. We are forever in your debt." Durga looked at them, these gods who had ruled for eons, who had been brought so low, who had learned humility the hard way. "Rise," she said. "Your throne is restored. Indra, but remember this lesson. You were not defeated because Mahishasura was stronger than you. You were defeated because the cosmos required balance. You had grown complacent, perhaps even arrogant in your power. Mahishasura's rise was a correction, and his fall is another. Remember that all power is temporary, all positions are provisional. Rule with wisdom, not just strength." The gods listened, chastened. They had learned what Mahishasura never did until the very end. That power without awareness of its limits becomes its own destruction. Over the following days, the heavens were restored. The exiled gods returned to their palaces, though many things had changed. Indra reclaimed his throne, but he was different now. More thoughtful, less quick to anger, more aware of the cycles of cosmic justice. The flow of sacrifices from Earth resumed as word spread that the gods had returned. The cosmic order reasserted itself. Seasons became regular again. The natural laws that had been breaking down under Mahishasura's rule stabilized. On Earth, kingdoms that had submitted to Mahishasura's rule found themselves free again. Some rejoiced. Others, who had found his rule preferable to the chaos that preceded it, were less certain. Because this is the complexity of the story. Mahishasura, for all his flaws, had brought order to many places that needed it. His defeat was cosmically necessary, but not universally celebrated. The Asuras retreated to their own realms, diminished but not destroyed. The cosmic rivalry between Devas and Asuras would continue. This was, after all, a fundamental dynamic of the universe, not something that could be permanently resolved. But something had changed. Both sides had learned lessons about the nature of power, about the dangers of absolute conviction, about the price of ambition unchecked by wisdom. As the cosmos settled back into its rhythms, Durga prepared to return to her unmanifest state. The gods offered her a permanent place in the pantheon. "Stay with us," they pleaded. "Rule alongside us. Your power is needed." But Durga shook her head gently. "I am not meant to rule. I am the force that restores balance when balance is broken. I am the mother who protects her children when they cannot protect themselves. I emerge when I am needed, and I return to the cosmic source when my work is done. This is my nature. But what if we need you again?" Indra asked. "Then call upon me again," Durga replied. I'm never truly gone. I am in every mother who protects her child, in every woman who stands up to injustice, in every force that pushes back against chaos and darkness. I am the Shakti, the power that animates all creation. You need only remember that, and I am present. With those words, she began to dissolve, not dying, but demanifesting, returning to the cosmic energy from which she had emerged. Her lion roared one final time, a sound that echoed across all three worlds, a reminder and a promise. The weapons she had wielded returned to their original divine owners, but they were somehow changed, tempered by her use of them, forever carrying a trace of her power. And then she was gone, leaving behind only a lingering sense of presence, like a fragrance in the air after flowers have been removed. Now, thousands of years after these events, the story of Mahishasura and Durga is celebrated across India and the Hindu diaspora during a festival called Durga Puja or Navaratri, 9 nights dedicated to the goddess in her various forms. During this festival, elaborate statues of Durga are created, showing her in her iconic pose, standing on the buffalo demon, her many arms wielding weapons, her lion by her side. These images, called murtis, are worshipped for days with prayers, offerings, and rituals. Then, in a symbolic recreation of her return to the cosmic source, the statues are immersed in rivers and dissolved. It's one of the most important festivals in Hindu culture, particularly in Bengal, where entire communities come together to create pandals, temporary structures housing massive, artistic representations of the goddess. But here's what's fascinating. The festival isn't just about celebrating Durga's victory. It's about celebrating the triumph of Dharma over adharma, order over chaos, righteousness over ego. Mahishasura, in this context, becomes symbolic of all the negative qualities within us: arrogance, unchecked ambition, the delusion that we can become invincible or escape the fundamental laws of existence. However, we need to address something important. Not everyone celebrates Mahishasura's death. In recent years, particularly among certain tribal and lower caste communities in India, there has been a movement to reclaim Mahishasura as a folk hero rather than a villain. Some communities claim he was actually a king of indigenous peoples who was demonized by Brahminical Hindu texts. They point out that the term Asura may have originally referred to indigenous tribes or non-Veda peoples rather than literal demons. In this interpretation, Mahishasura was a resistance leader fighting against the oppression of the Aryan gods, and his defeat represents the conquest of indigenous peoples by the Vedic civilization. This interpretation has sparked significant debate. Some scholars support it as a valid reading of the political dimensions embedded in mythology. Others reject it as a modern reinterpretation that ignores the metaphysical and spiritual dimensions of the story. The truth, as usual, is likely complex. Myths operate on multiple levels simultaneously. The metaphysical level, the story represents cosmic principles, the restoration of balance, the limits of power, the role of the divine feminine. The psychological level, Mahishasura represents aspects of the human psyche that need to be transcended: ego, arrogance, the delusion of permanence. The social level, the story may indeed reflect historical conflicts, conquests, and the way victors write history. All of these readings can coexist. The story is rich enough to contain multitudes. One of the most profound aspects of this story is its centering of feminine power, Shakti, as the ultimate force of the cosmos. In Hindu philosophy, the masculine divine, represented by gods like Shiva, Vishnu, Brahma, is understood as pure consciousness, pure awareness. But consciousness without power is inert. It's the feminine principle, Shakti, Prakriti, the goddess in her various forms, that animates consciousness, that makes action possible, that creates, sustains, and destroys the universe. Durga's victory over Mahishasura isn't just a military victory. It's a philosophical statement. Ultimate power is feminine. The universe itself is feminine in its creative and destructive aspects. This is why, in Hindu iconography, You often see male gods standing or lying beneath their female consorts. Shiva lies beneath Kali. Vishnu reclines beneath Lakshmi. This isn't submission in a patriarchal sense. It's recognition that consciousness requires energy, that the masculine divine is incomplete without the feminine. The Mahishasura story takes this further. The male gods couldn't defeat the demon. They were bound by their own limitations, their own cosmic roles. It required a manifestation of the primal feminine force to restore balance. This has made Durga, and by extension the concept of Shakti, central to certain forms of Hinduism, particularly in regions like Bengal. The worship of the goddess becomes recognition that the universe is fundamentally powered by feminine energy. Let's return to Mahishasura's original quest, immortality. He sought to become unkillable, to escape death, to exist forever. In some ways, he achieved his goal. His story has lasted thousands of years. He's remembered, represented in art, discussed in texts. He gained a kind of immortality through narrative. But this isn't what he wanted. He wanted physical immortality, the perpetuation of his ego, his sense of self. And this is where Hindu philosophy makes a crucial distinction. True immortality, according to Hindu thought, comes not from preserving the ego, but from dissolving it. The ultimate goal is moksha, liberation from the cycle of birth and death, achieved when the individual soul recognizes its unity with the cosmic soul. The ego, the sense of being a separate self, is understood as an illusion, and clinging to it only perpetuates suffering. Mahishasura sought to make his ego permanent. This was his fundamental error. By seeking to escape death, he was actually running away from the natural flow of existence, trying to resist the very fabric of reality. Durga, by killing him, actually liberated him. Death, in this context, isn't punishment, it's release. It's the natural completion of a cycle, allowing for transformation and rebirth. This is a profoundly different understanding of death than what many Western cultures hold. Death isn't failure or defeat. It's transition, transformation, an essential part of the cosmic dance. The story also provides deep insight into the nature of power itself. Mahishasura accumulated power through tapas, through discipline, focus, and sacrifice. This power was real and effective. He conquered the three worlds. He defeated the gods. His power was non-illusion. But power has a logic to it. Power accumulated through obsessive focus tends to be brittle. It's strong in direct application, but vulnerable to the unexpected. Mahishasura's boon made him invincible in all the ways he could imagine being attacked. But he couldn't imagine Durga. This speaks to a broader truth. Absolute power tends to create its own vulnerabilities. The more specific the protections, the more potential loopholes exist. The more certain one becomes of invincibility, the more blind spots develop. Durga's power, by contrast, wasn't accumulated through penance. It wasn't granted by a boon. It was inherent, fundamental, primordial. She was power itself rather than someone who had acquired power. And that kind of power doesn't have the same vulnerabilities. This distinction appears throughout Hindu mythology. Power that comes from external sources, boons, weapons, accumulated merit, can be lost or countered. Power that comes from inner realization, from alignment with cosmic principles, is unassailable. Despite being the antagonist, Mahishasura is a tragic figure. He wasn't born evil. He was born into a cosmic conflict not of his making. He grew up in a world that told him his people were demons, were lesser, were meant to be subjugated. He refused to accept this narrative and decided to change it. His methods were problematic: conquest, violence, disruption of cosmic order. But his underlying motivation, refusing to accept an unjust hierarchy, seeking to overturn a system that privileged some beings over others, wasn't inherently wrong. The tragedy is that his approach perpetuated the very cycle he was trying to escape. By seeking power over others, he became the oppressor he hated. By trying to establish a new order through force, he created the same dynamics of domination that had harmed his people. There's a version of this story where Mahishasura, upon gaining his power, could have worked to create genuine balance. A cosmos where devas and asuras coexisted as equals, where diversity was celebrated rather than hierarchized. But instead, he simply inverted the hierarchy, placing himself and his people on top. This is the lesson that both Mahishasura and the devas had to learn. Cosmic balance isn't achieved by one side dominating the other. It's achieved through recognition of interdependence, through understanding that apparent opposites are actually complementary forces that on a psychological level. This story operates as a map of inner transformation. Mahishasura represents the ego, that part of us that wants to be permanent, invincible, superior. The ego fears death, fears change, fears anything that might diminish it. So it seeks immortality, seeks to become unkillable, seeks to conquer all threats. The penance Mahishasura performs represents the ego's strategy of control. Through discipline, through force of will, through accumulation of power and knowledge, the ego tries to make itself secure. And this strategy works up to a point. We can build impressive structures, accomplish remarkable things, gain significant control over our environment and even our inner states. But ultimately, the ego cannot make itself permanent. There's always something it can't control, can't predict, can't dominate. For Mahishasura, that something was Durga, the force that existed beyond his conceptual framework. Psychologically, Durga represents the power that dissolves the ego, not through punishment, but through grace. She's the force of radical transformation that can't be controlled or commanded, that comes when it's needed and not before. Her many arms represent the multiplicity of life, the fact that reality is more complex than the ego's simplistic frameworks. Her weapons represent different modes of cutting through illusion. Her lion represents instinctive wisdom, the knowledge that exists before and beyond conceptual thought. The death of Mahishasura, then, is ego death, that moment of radical transformation when our sense of being a separate, independent self is pierced, when we recognize our fundamental interconnection with all existence. And like Mahishasura's death in the story, ego death isn't the end. It's liberation into something larger, something more true. This ancient story has striking relevance to our modern world. Think about how many of our current crises stem from the same impulse that drove Mahishasura. The desire for invincibility, for power without accountability, for conquest without consequence. Corporations pursue endless growth as if they can escape the limits of a finite planet. Nations accumulate weapons seeking security through the ability to destroy, creating insecurity instead. Individuals pursue wealth and fame seeking permanence, only to find emptiness. The pattern repeats. Those who lack power seek it desperately, and once they gain it, they often become the oppressors they once hated. Revolutions replace one elite with another. Movements for liberation sometimes create new hierarchies. Mahishasura's story reminds us that power, especially power pursued for its own sake, contains the seeds of its own destruction. Every empire that believes itself eternal eventually falls. Every tyrant who thinks themselves invincible eventually meets their match. But the story offers more than just a warning. It offers a different model, Durga's power. Durga's strength comes not from conquest, but from alignment with cosmic principles. She's powerful because she acts in service of balance, not ego. She manifests when needed and returns to the source when her work is complete. She doesn't seek to rule permanently. This is the model of power we need. Power in service of balance. Power that knows its proper limits. Power that can be released when it's no longer needed. In our current moment, when conversations about gender, power, and social roles are central to public discourse, the story of Durga and Mahishasura offers interesting perspectives. Durga is not powerful despite being feminine. She's powerful because of it. Her strength doesn't come from emulating masculine modes of power. It comes from embodying a different kind of power entirely. She's fierce without being cruel. She's strong without being domineering. She destroys what must be destroyed without hatred. She protects without being possessive. This model of power, sometimes called fierce compassion, is increasingly recognized as essential. The idea that care and strength are opposites, that one must choose between being nurturing or being powerful, is revealed as false. Durga shows that the most effective power is that which acts from a place of both wisdom and compassion, that combines the ability to create and the ability to destroy, that knows when to fight and when to withdraw. For women navigating patriarchal structures, Durga offers an archetype of empowerment that doesn't require abandoning feminine values. For men confronting toxic masculinity, she offers an example of how power can be exercised without domination. For everyone, she represents the possibility of integrating our fears and our gentle aspects, recognizing that both are necessary, both are sacred. Mahishasura's story is also deeply relevant to our culture's relationship with ambition. We live in a time that celebrates hustle culture, that tells us to optimize every moment, that promises if we just work hard enough, sacrifice enough, we can achieve anything. Mahishasura is the patron saint of this worldview. He literally tortured himself for years to achieve his goals. And he succeeded. His tapas worked. He gained his boon. He conquered the three worlds. By the metrics of achievement culture, he was the ultimate success story. But he was also profoundly unhappy and ultimately destroyed by his own success. The story asks us, what are we willing to sacrifice in pursuit of our goals? What's the point of achieving everything if we lose ourselves in the process? What happens when we finally get what we wanted and discover it doesn't satisfy? Mahishasura sought immortality because he feared death. He sought power because he felt powerless. He sought conquest because he felt subjugated. But none of these external achievements addressed his internal conditions. He remained driven by fear, anger, and the need to prove himself. His story suggests that perhaps we should examine our ambitions more carefully. Are we seeking external achievement to avoid internal work? Are we accumulating power to mask powerlessness? Are we building monuments to distract from emptiness? These are uncomfortable questions, but they're necessary ones. The story also illuminates the cycle of violence and retaliation that dominates so much of human history. The Asuras were oppressed by the Devas. Mahishasura, in response, oppresses the Devas. This seems like justice to him. Turnabout is fair play, but it doesn't actually break the cycle. It just reverses who's on top. We see this pattern everywhere. Colonized peoples, once liberated, sometimes colonize others. Groups that suffer discrimination, once empowered, sometimes discriminate. Individuals abused in childhood sometimes become abusers. The cycle continues until someone or something interrupts it with a different logic. Durga represents that interruption. She doesn't defeat Mahishasura to establish her own rule. She doesn't seek revenge on behalf of the Devas. She acts to restore balance, then withdraws. She breaks the cycle not by winning the game, but by changing the rules. This suggests a path forward for our own conflicts. We need interventions that genuinely restore balance, rather than simply reversing hierarchies. We need forms of justice that heal rather than perpetuate harm. We need the wisdom to know when to fight, when to reconcile, and when to step back. Entirely point, one of the most profound aspects of the Mahishasura story is its complexity around the concept of evil. In many Western narratives, evil is absolute. Villains are purely evil, heroes are purely good, and the conflict is straightforward. But Hindu mythology generally operates with more nuance. Mahishasura isn't evil in any absolute sense. He's a being acting according to his nature, his conditioning, his understanding. He performs intense spiritual practices, something generally considered virtuous. He achieves incredible discipline, a quality usually admired. He even rules with a certain sense of order. His problem isn't that he's fundamentally wicked. It's that he's out of balance, that his actions disrupt cosmic harmony, that his ambition overreaches the limits that make existence sustainable. This suggests a different understanding of evil. Perhaps evil isn't a substance or quality that some beings possess. Perhaps it's a state of imbalance, a deviation from Dharma, a violation of the cosmic order. From this perspective, anyone can slide into evil by losing balance, by letting one aspect of themselves dominate all others, by pursuing goals without awareness of consequences. And conversely, redemption is always possible through the restoration of balance. This isn't moral relativism. It's not saying everything is equally valid. It's saying that moral categories are relational and contextual rather than absolute. What matters is whether actions serve harmony or discord, balance or imbalance, evolution or stagnation. The concept of Dharma is central to this story, but it's notoriously difficult to translate or explain. Dharma is often translated as righteousness or duty, but it's more complex than either term suggests. Dharma is the principle that holds existence together, the way things naturally function when they're in proper relationship with everything else. Every being has its Dharma, its proper role, its natural way of being. A river's Dharma is to flow. A tree's Dharma is to grow toward light. An animal's Dharma is to follow its instincts in balance with its ecosystem. For conscious beings, Dharma becomes more complex because we have choice. We can act in accordance with our nature and the cosmic order, or we can violate it. And here's the subtle point. Determining right action isn't always straightforward. Mahishasura,